everyone.
I'm back, baby.
It's Jake Ciely.
I'm great. Everybody else sucks.
Oh,
no. It's every nightmare I've ever had.
Excuse me?
It's time to check the link.
Pretty crazy, huh? But it doesn't matter because none of this has anything to do with the show.
You know what? You just made the list.
Oh, wait, you serious? Let me laugh even harder.
It's all in football.
Sure, we talk about it all the time. Really? No.
What's up, you ducks? It's All in Football Wednesdays with myself and Jeff Ratcliffe. We're getting ready. Sounds like it's going to be a big draft weekend, so hopefully we get everything you need before then. Last 2 days with Chris Meany and then yesterday with Warren Carpenter. Did a lot. Got a lot more to talk about with Jeff and some trade. And what a better time than have a show with Jeff and a big trade going down. Not like you haven't talked about it plenty on your Sirius XM show, which you should be listening to as well if you haven't checked that out there. Speaking of checking things out, code ALLIN, all in, at FTN, 20% all their packages if you're getting into DFS and to betting, and Jeff's got stuff over there to help you out. All the type of stuff like your cornerback matchups, a lot of tools, a lot of great stuff. If you want to see my rankings and projections, which you can customize the cheat sheet, we're going to really talk about that specifically for one player today, but if you go over there, theathletic.com/BetsTV, all capital, just so you know I found that out, it has to be all capitals in the BetsTV for it to work. First free month over there. And please, 5 stars, subscribe, rate, review. We get to do more free shows for you guys the more you give us love. That's how it works, right, Jeff? So, I have a feeling you've talked about this just a little bit so far today. Big trade for newsworthy items. Sony Michel heads to the Rams, but is it from a fantasy perspective? Let's touch on the Rams first, Jeff. Your initial reactions on Darrell Henderson. I know you've probably updated your rankings. What does this do for Sony Michel? What does this do for the Rams backfield, for your opinion in general?
It complicates things. I mean, that's for sure. So this morning, yes, I talked about it on Sirius XM. Actually, the show before me, this hosted by John Hansen, Adam Schefter stopped by, and he said that this probably positions Michel to be the lead back with the Rams. Now, I say this all the time when it comes to Schefter, Ian Rappaport, any insider out there, Jason Lockenfora, guys like that. If they are reporting, it is one thing. If they are speculating, it is something completely different. People often take what Schefter says as gospel, no matter which one, right? Reporting or speculating. Now, Schefter knows more than most out there, obviously most human beings in terms of all these football teams, but it still is speculation. However, I do think he is onto something here. Teams make moves for reasons. This team had Darrell Henderson and nobody else. Xavier Jones, great story last year, made as a special teamer. Jake Funk, cool, athletic, but they had Darrell Henderson and nobody else. And Darrell Henderson was already hurt to start this season out. He's already hurt. So they needed to make a move. I think Michel comes in and is more the early down guy. Henderson will see work in the early downs. Michel will see work in passing downs, but I do have Henderson projected at slightly more targets, which puts them both at RB3s. So that means, Jake, the instant reaction for a lot of people, should I go out and, where am I drafting him? And I got to get him in No, chill. We don't really need either of them at this point. If you drafted Henderson last weekend or the weekend before or whatever, wait, see what happens. And bro on Twitter, the bro, and you know the bro who you are, oh, don't draft until after the preseason. We get it, bro. We get it. You're better than all of us. You can just leave it alone. Sometimes we have to have drafts earlier. It is what it is. But yeah, Jake, it's really complicated, and I don't like it for really either party in that backfield.
Yeah, so real quick, G-Man J in the chat room, phenomenal shirt. In case you can't see, it's Aqua Teen Hunger Force as the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That's what the shirt is for today. I appreciate it. So for this whole conversation, yes, this kind of goes into something you and I talked about before too with beat writers, is if you have one beat writer saying something, it's kind of like, okay, he noticed something, but he's like any of us noticing something. When 4, 5, 6 beat reporters start saying the same things, that's when you're like, ooh, okay, maybe we should take note. A good example of that is the Latavius Murray thing. Like, if one person was like, oh, Tony Jones looks to be pushing him, now you have 4, 5, 6 people saying, it looks like it might be Tony Jones. So still word out on that. I only bring that up for this conversation about what you were saying about Schefter. I differ a little bit than you on this. I'm still more on the fact that Darrell Henderson's the lead, not the lead he was going to be, but similar to Austin Eckler in the fact that he can be 14, 15, maybe 16 touches a week. More value in the passing game, limited rushing upside, not getting necessarily 250 carries like we might hope, but you're telling me, you know what a good comparison might be is Alvin Kamara rushing with James White this year, not old James White, not the 70 receptions James White. So maybe Duke Johnson. How about Alvin Kamara rushing with Duke Johnson receiving? And I think that's Darrell Henderson for me. I think Sony Michel, for what you said, obviously brought in because Xavier Jones and Jake Funk weren't the answer. I told people, a lot of people saying that. I have Henderson. Who should I grab as the backup? And I said, nobody. If something happens to Henderson, it was going to be very much like the Chargers. I don't want anybody. It's just going to be a mess. So I think this answers the question behind him, but I lean more still towards Henderson. I did drop Henderson. I cannot conceivably have kept him as RB17 with this move, but he's still in the mid to upper 20s. Michel is into the mid to upper 30s for me, and I think if anything were to happen to Darrell Henderson and he does miss time, obviously Sony Michel is a rock-solid RB2, but I think that if I'm drafting today, that's still how I draft. Now, of course, what you're talking about, Jeff, if this thumb injury is more concerning that they're letting on, and now he's going to miss time, then yes, that opens the door for Sony Michel. And I think that's the concern when you draft Henderson, is that if he misses time, Sony Michel looks good. Does he ever get that lead back? And I think that's the biggest concern with Henderson now.
That certainly could be the case. We heard Sean McVay voice concerns about Henderson's inability to stay healthy. That's the whole reason why he's not playing in the preseason.
Wasn't going to play the preseason.
So, I mean, the breadcrumbs were already there. We didn't know if it was going to be a veteran or if it was going to be a situation like this. I do think a point needs to be made, though, for anybody watching right now who has a draft this weekend. Just because a player is ranked in a certain range doesn't mean you have to draft that player. You can draft other players in the same range if you don't feel comfortable. And Jake, it sounds like we probably have these guys flip-flopped in rankings. I put Michel up a little bit higher. You put Henderson up a little bit higher. All of that uncertainty, because I'll be honest, I really don't actually know. And I don't think any of us really actually know. So we're doing it based on our inclinations here. But that uncertainty, when I have a choice of in that range, say it's Henderson if you're higher on him, or Javonte Williams, I'm probably just going to go with Javonte Williams, because I have a better sense of what to expect out of him than what I have out of Henderson. So just because a player is in a certain spot doesn't mean we have to draft said player.
Absolutely, and that's a really good way of putting it. So would you take I wasn't going to even talk about him today, but would you, at this point, with what's going on with his reports, would you take DeAndre Swift or Darrell Henderson?
Well, I'm not taking DeAndre Swift, but I do have him ranked ahead. So the problem I keep running into with DeAndre Swift is if he does go where he's sort of going, let's say he's a fourth-round guy, there's a pathway to getting a top 12 wide receiver in the fourth round as opposed to a questionable top 20 running back. It comes down to roster construction. I mean, how many times this is like the drinking game, right? Like roster construction drink. We say it every stinking episode on this show.
Well, I was going to say, this is the third episode you and I only have done together, and I think all 3 weeks we've said that fourth, fifth, sixth round, just draft wide receivers. This is why, even if you don't subscribe to if you want to go 0 RB, elite RB, 1, whatever, stop getting hung up on that. You said it, roster construction, value, that's where you draft. But if you lean a direction, and that's why I always say, I lean where I want to, and I have drafts where I've started with 2 wide receivers because of value. I have one draft where I started receiver Travis Kelce because Kelce fell into the second round, and I get my first running back to the third. But I lean and want to get 2 running backs in the first 3 rounds because once I get to the fourth, I can kind of not ignore running back in case a value fell, but 4th, 5th, 6th round, I could conceivably go 4 straight wide receivers and have all of them inside the top 20, 25.
Yeah, and I'm not even really concerned with the second running back. I've been waiting even longer.
I saw that.
Yeah, well, I've come out of drafts. I did the Sports Illustrated Invitational draft the other night. Now it was a Superflex draft, but I still came out of that draft with 3 top 12 wide receivers and Kamara. Now I was able to wait a little bit longer at quarterback. And, some people may not like what I did at quarterback, but with 3 flexes, I really wanted to hammer home the running backs and wide receivers and really beat my opponents to the flexes as opposed to beating them to the super flex. So again, it's all about the pathway, but I think either one is, and Jake, I wouldn't turn down the way you're doing it. If you're in a situation like you just mentioned where you're not getting that first running back to the third round, that's fine. Or if you have a running back, if people are, for some reason, are still scared of Jonathan Taylor and he falls to the second round, it's unbelievable value and you can't turn it down.
Well, I'll give you. So last night was the final flex draft. It was a normal snake. It was online. Great. Fabiano was picking at the 11th pick. I love his first 4 rounds. He went Taylor Gibson to start. But while I'm bringing that up, it's not so much to be like, go running back, because, again, Welsh and Bogman started Tyreek Hill and DeAndre Hopkins in the middle of the second round, and I like their team too. But I say Fabiano because the third and the fourth round, Amari Cooper and Robert Woods, 1 and 2. Like, that's what you're getting there. I'm looking at the 5th round from last night's draft, and Julio Jones, T. Higgins, DJ Moore, Ayuk, Galladay. Now in the 6th round, Tyler Boyd, Judy, Claypool, Jamar Chase, Juju Smith-Schuster, Deebo Samuel, Odell Beckham, and then Sutton and Robbie Anderson are falling to the 7th round. There's just that's why. It's because there's such this glut. And when I list off those names, what would you say, Jeff? 2 to 4 of those names probably finish top 20? Like that, and they're going to the 30s of wide receivers. Yeah, and even hey, we're not talking about Teddy Bridgewater right now, but even with Teddy Bridgewater under center, I mean, Jerry Jeudy, like this guy already showed signs down the stretch last year, and I don't care about drops whatsoever. Jerry Jeudy that late, you're stealing at that point. Now, I will say this though, Jake, like a lot of people out there, if they're not in their comfort zone in a draft, it makes it even more challenging. A lot of people, it's challenging enough in a draft. It's something they don't do very often in person. You can mock draft all day long. It's not really going to prepare you for an in-person draft. Don't even waste your time with mock auctions, by the way.
Oh, boy. I will not. I definitely will not. And I agree. Don't waste your time with that. But when you're drafting out of your comfort zone, it's really challenging. But you don't have to have 15 top 10 running backs. You get what I'm saying there. To be comfortable, you can have 1 or 2 top 12s and then punt from there, because you know what's going to happen. It's a fragile position. You're probably going to have to work waivers at the position anyway. So why not be loaded up at wide receiver? And this year there's such a pathway to doing so.
Yeah, there really is. And so the other side of this trade, and we are going to talk Teddy Bridgewater in a second because he was announced as the starter, as Jeff said. The other side is the Patriots side of the ball. Now, I don't remember if you and I have we talked Damian Harris yet, Jeff? Did you and I? Because I do so many shows.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. So I don't want to say only, because I wasn't the only one. A very smart person that used to be at NBC Sports Edge, and now one of the, what would you say, top? Would he be on Mount Rushmore? I'm trying to think. If we did like a fantasy Mount Rushmore, would we put Silva on there?
There's generational Mount Rushmores, because I think you'd have to do an OG Rushmore from the pen and paper era. But yeah, sort of that the transformative we talked about.
Our generation.
Yeah, we came in 2010. He was probably already there at
Evan
that
Silva
point.
Yeah. So okay, so Evan Silva, I think he already had Damian Harris inside his top 24. He was actually, I think it was 21 or 22. I had him at 26. I don't know where you had him, and you did as well.
Yeah.
So he moved up, but not that much, because we're already pretty high on him. So taking Sony Michel out of my projections and rankings put some on Harris, but it also put some on Stevenson. And now J.J. Taylor basically went from a non-factor to having some, but again, most of it went to Harris and Stevenson. So Harris moved up to RB23, not that far from me. I'm still behind Silva. Maybe you are even higher than I am, but I think this is just solidifying. My take this entire time was I thought Sony Michel might get cut until he looked healthy. And then at that point, I was like, all right, I guess he's still making the team. But this opened it up. So Damian Harris, the real question that we come down to, Jeff, is one is where do you have him? Because I do want to know that. But two, is there a chance we're fooling ourselves because of Bellatrix?
Bellatrix. I would often go with Belichickery, but I like that. I get the Harry Potter reference. So I have him at 21, and so we're not that far off. We're back in RB2 range. I thought he was in that sort of, for me, he was in that sort of sexy RB3 range before. So you have the rookies, and then basically it was Harris. So, I had Javonte Williams, Michael Carter, Trey Sermon, all in that range. And I know they're sort of moving around a little bit right now because of camp and all the narratives out of camp. But that's where I had him. I drafted him last weekend for that reason. And, obviously blind squirrel in this a little bit, but certainly upped his value. The challenge I'm going to run into here, and I think all of us are going to run into, is they have roles in that offense. So it's not as if, even though Damian Harris did play, on passing downs at Alabama, it's not as if all of a sudden, okay, he's our 3-down guy, and here we go off to the races. He's going to be an early down guy. The James White / I guess we should say J.J. Taylor role, because he's eventually going to go into that role anyway. That role is not going away in that offense. Ramondre Stevenson is going to be used in that offense, and he's played very good. Great pick by them on day 3. They don't do very well with first-round picks, but, day 3. N'Keal Harry, Sony Michel, whatever, write them off. Hopefully that isn't a bad news for Mac Jones there. But Ramondre Stevenson, pretty solid. But it is a very run-heavy team. And especially once we get Cam Newton out of the mix, because it's almost inevitable that's going to happen at some point this season, unless he guides them, and they're off to the races in the beginning of the season and they're in the playoff mix. He'll eventually very likely lose his job to Mac Jones, who is not going to run anywhere near as much as Cam Newton, which means now there's more meat on the bone for Damian Harris. So right now, Newton puts a little bit of a cap on him, but I think he's fine to look at as an RB2. Now, my hope, Jake, he's there in the 5th round, right? So if I end up in the back end of the 1st round, which is where I'm in every stinking draft, I'll draft usually a running back in the 1st round. Usually it's Tyreek Hill or Devontae Adams if he falls, or Stephon Diggs in the 3rd round or 2nd round. Then 3rd round, 4th round, wide out. Damian Harris, not a bad dart to throw there in the 5th round. I just hope he doesn't go in the 4th round. That's a little bit too much for me.
Yeah, he actually went with the 2nd pick of the 6th round last night, obviously before the news. Let's play a little game here of versus these guys. Would you take, at this point, I'll just name off the 5 running backs that went in front of him, and I think you're taking Harris over all of them, but we'll see, because obviously the 30th running back, and we both have him way higher than that, but I just want to make sure for the other names. Chase Edmonds, Kareem Hunt, Mostert, Sermon, Jamal Williams. We're going Harris over all those guys, right?
Oh, yeah. Jamal Williams, that's kind of early for him.
Yeah, so this draft, it's funny. You were in a flex draft, Jeff. So we did the first 2 flex drafts live in New York, the very first weekend, Hall of Fame weekend. These are essentially 2 weeks later. And you saw the running backs didn't go that heavy in my draft or yours. You were in the super flex. I was in the standard snake. These 2 drafts, 2.5-ish weeks later, the running backs are back up again, dominated the first 2, almost 3 rounds. So that's why the Jamal Williams pick happened. I'm trying to excuse that away for a little bit. But okay, so the next 5 in front of him, in front of those ones that I mentioned, Darrell Henderson, Mike Davis, Gaskin, Dobbins, and Jacobs. Harris, over any of them, half of them, some of them?
Dobbins would still be over him. I mean, I'm not overly bullish on Dobbins from a volume standpoint, but I love the skill set. Jacobs is close, but that would be the only other one, and I actually do have Harris 1 spot ahead of Jacobs right now.
Okay. Fair. That's certainly fair enough, and we covered the Henderson situation. Yeah, Jay, I know, but I already made a list this week twice. I didn't want to do 3 days in a row of making a list. I know. I did it with Chris on Mondays. I think Chris and I have made a list all 3 Mondays, and then I introduced Lauren to making a list, so I didn't want to do it for 3 days in a row. I'm saving Jeff from that. Let me backtrack real quick. I want to say Marty from Canada. It goes way back, just so you know, Jeff. He goes way back, actually, with G-Man J. Shout out to Marty. And then answer a question real quick, James, because I've seen you ask a couple times. This isn't college football, and this isn't a bets show. There are plenty. Again, use the code ALLIN, the code for FTN, or check out the other shows on BetsTV. Lots of them. That's where you want to go for the bet show. This is not only not bets show, but it is also not college football. And maybe we'll sprinkle some bets in during the season on Wednesdays, just to kind of like throw some stuff up. But that's not what the show is about. Real quick, before we get to Teddy Bridgewater, I do want to get to Matthew Dupont's question. Is Tony Jones, so we were talking about it, and I brought him up, is Tony Jones worth drafting in a redraft lead regardless of the scoring settings, Jeff?
Well, I think every time I get asked questions like this, my answer is still going to be it depends. It really depends.
How about a half point PPR, 16 rounds, 12 teams, let's say your average draft? I say yes, because I say the 13th, 14th round, in case Latavius Murray gets cut. If Latavius Murray doesn't get cut, you cut Tony Jones for your week 1 waivers.
I'm usually done drafting running backs by that point, and my question is, what wide receivers are on the board? Are we talking Tony Jones or Bryan Edwards? Because I'm going to go Bryan Edwards. Like that. It always depends. Is he in the top 192, as our friend Mike Clay might say? Yes, he is now for me. So maybe that's the answer that you're looking for. 192 players drafted in the standard draft. Yeah, he's in that top 192.
Okay. Hey, that's the fair. I would, mostly because it's the different strategies too. I usually have 6 and maybe even 7 wide receivers by that point, and I'm kind of going more for the Stevensons and the Tony Joneses of the world at that point. So it's more so we just kind of like have different paths to our strategies, but that's why Jeff keeps saying it. We're like drink every single time. People are going to be drunk by the time they get to the season. Draft strategy and roster construction and value and all that type of stuff. All right, so let's talk Teddy Bridgewater. It's funny, Jeff, because over at The Athletic, we have like news briefs and stuff like that for like the breaking news if you're on the app. And they asked if there was anything to contribute for fantasy. And I said, not really, because here's why. For Teddy Bridgewater, nobody's really drafting Teddy Bridgewater or Drew Lock unless you're in a super flex or 2 quarterback leagues. And people already know that. This is why I'm saying there's not an answer. For Judy, and assuming the reports are accurate and Courtland Sutton's going to be healthy for week 1, assuming that, Courtland Sutton, talent-wise, was being drafted, and rightfully so, as a fringe wide receiver 1 last year. He's not going that high because of the concerns if he's healthy. But Judy's bump, I agree with you. The bump comes with Teddy versus Drew Lock. I think Drew Lock would have been more aggressive, kind of like a Jameis Winston type of situation. But I think that Judy gets a small bump, but it's not like he's going from, for me, it's not like he's going from 40 to 25. It's kind of like the Damian Harris bump. So is your bump a little bit bigger, or are you kind of in line with what my thinking is?
I think I already bumped him.
Okay.
I did move him up. I have him back end wide receiver 2 territory now, and did move Sutton down. For the longest time, it was Sutton just a tick ahead of Judy. Now that, I want to minimize risk as much as I can on draft day while still being really aggressive. So that's why I think, Judy's a little bit of an aggressive play in that range. But you're also, he's going to be on the field. So last year, Teddy Bridgewater was able to sustain surprisingly good production from the Carolina wideouts. Now, it wasn't consistent across the season. Robbie Anderson, a better start. Curtis Samuel, a better finish. DJ Moore, somehow, 1,000-yard season quietly. Yeah, well, no September for DJ Moore. And, he's got upside, so there's that. He's a capable, competent quarterback who is definitely a bridge until next year when maybe a future Hall of Famer becomes available via trade and they throw the house at Green Bay. But it doesn't bother me. I'm not reacting one way or the other. I still think that Judy is the priority target as the back end wide receiver 2. But if Sutton falls a little bit, there could be some good value with him as well.
Yeah, or possibly the team falls apart in general and they end up picking inside the top 10 again, and they take possibly a Howell or a Rattler or go that route. Yeah, I think that we all want the Aaron Rodgers situation to happen, but it's kind of one of those ones where it's like similar, like, hey, can we free blank player? So before we move on, Anthony Caruso, if you want to throw his question up there, which running back going after the 6th, 7th round do you think is the most likely to become a borderline RB1 every week? I mean, outside of the backups, I don't think you're going to get after 6th or 7th, because the backups are the backups, so the guys if somebody gets hurt, which the Williamses, plural, like the Damian, Darrell, Jamal if he falls that far, Tony Pollards and stuff like that. But so I'll say more for the 6th, 7th round. I know this isn't the question, Jeff, but I'll say the 6th, 7th round would be the UNC duo of Michael Carter and Javonte Williams, which you have said before. You actually said on the very first show, you do not want Javonte or Carter getting into the 5th round. So getting them in the 6th or 7th round, I think by week 6 or 7, they're the lead. But you're going to have to be patient with them.
Yeah, I am a huge Ty Johnson fan right now. I hope he is amazing. I am a huge Royce Freeman fan. I hope he does awesome. Sure,
I was so happy people were talking up Royce Freeman after that game.
It's so good. Yeah, hey, honestly, overreact as much as you want to those preseason snaps. I've never seen anybody win their fantasy championship in mid-August. Only happens, well, historically in late December, now in early January. I have no worry whatsoever about the North Carolina boys. If you really want somebody outside of that, and it's not even, I think you have to make your choice, Jake. of the Tampa guys, because I think Giovanni Bernard playing in this previous preseason game was a good indicator that Bruce Arians, yes, he may love Giovanni Bernard, but we shouldn't love him for fantasy purposes. So it really is going to come down to Fournette and Jones, and it could just be Fournette and Jones. But if one of them does emerge there, they're both going, 7th, 8th, 9th round. Fournette, sometimes I see him in the 9th round. One of those emerges, I don't know about borderline or back-end RB1, but certainly a huge return on investment. But you have to make your choice, and ultimately you have to choose wisely, like in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know if there is a choice on that one. I don't think there is a cup. they're all just the shoddy ones. I guess the shoddiest one was the right cup, but you know what I'm saying. Let's talk about some other teams that we initially had before we had all this news kind of coming out. The first one that I put down here, and I'm glad you tagged yourself as wanting to talk about this, because this is interesting. Because a month ago, I was drafting all of the Jalen Reagor. I was all over the fact of miscast as a rookie, similar to Henry Ruggs, should not be playing outside. That's not his skill set. Was asked to be a number one as a rookie. He wasn't ready for that. That team was a mess last year. But this year, it doesn't look like Rager's improving. It looks like it's the Jamar Chase, but to a lesser talent of Jamar Chase and getting to the speed of the NFL and getting open like he was in college. And it looks like, if you look at snap counts with first team in the preseason, he might be the third wide receiver behind either Fulgham or Watkins, with Smith being the one. How concerned are you, and are you concerned enough that you think Watkins is actually relevant?
Well, I'm not as concerned. I spoke to Adam Kaplan on my SiriusXM show, and of course, Adam is very plugged in with the Philadelphia Eagles. And he said that Reagor is going to be an outside receiver for this team, so he's not going to be in the slot, whereas you have seen Watkins in the slot. It really looks like it is going to be Devontae Smith and then some combination there on the outside, at least initially. Reagor was behind the 8 ball to start the camp out because of the personal tragedy that he endured, which is just awful, and don't wish that on anybody. So he's been playing a little bit of catch up here and has made some splashes, obviously, in camp, as you alluded to there. So I still think that there's a lot of potential with him, and I think that Quez Watkins offers a lot of potential as well. But of the two, Watkins seems decidedly more the slot receiver and Reagor more the outside receiver. So I'll still take a shot or two on Reagor. As we mentioned earlier, Jake, you said earlier with Tony Jones, hey, if you draft a guy in the 13th round, what do you care if you end up cutting him a few weeks into the season? There's no value cost there really to your team. You're ultimately going to need spots anyway. So if I'm going to take a shot there, am I going to draft Emmanuel Sanders, who has no ceiling whatsoever, or am I going to draft a guy like Reagor who does? I'm going to go Reagor every time with that choice. So as far as I've been told, still in the mix to be a starting outside receiver for the team.
Okay, so you can get even more value on Reagor. He basically, I don't know how much more. He was essentially still going for free before this even happened. So let's talk about one that was a little bit mixed from week one. There was talk about Byron Pringle and Demarcus Robinson and the fact that Hardman was only on the field for 3 wide. It changed a little bit in week 2 of the preseason, Jeff. So are we confident enough that Hardman is finally settled in as the number 2? Or I will give you my answer first on this, Jeff, my answer is I still don't care. You know why? Because how long have we been playing this game of let's figure out who the third pass catcher is? It was Sammy Watkins at week 1 and then never again. And then even when Sammy Watkins wasn't doing the week 1 joke, like I'm just kidding around, it was 5, 6 games maybe. And good luck picking when they were, because it still comes down to Hill and Kelsey demand so much. We're talking almost 50% of the target volume going to them before you incorporate the backfield and the rest of the guys. So I'm still passing on Hardman. Jeff, are you in on Hardman?
It's challenging because all along I just wanted to see it out of Hardman. I wanted to see them actually use him in 2 wide sets, which they did. Obviously, no Tyreek Hill out there. And by the way, reports out of Kansas City, Tyreek Hill's fine. Just a little tweak. They don't need to play him anyway, so they didn't play him. Hardman had end zone targets on successive plays in that game. He had 8 targets from Patrick Mahomes. So the upside is certainly there. And when it comes to an offense like Kansas City, sometimes it's just you want to get a piece of it. Like I keep saying that about Dallas this year. I want a piece of Dallas. And yeah, maybe it isn't CeeDee Lamb who's going very early. He's the sexy pick this year. Maybe it isn't Amari Cooper if you don't get him in the right spot. So then it's Michael Gallup. Okay, Michael Gallup's decidedly the third guy, but at least I still have a piece of the offense. Same thing with McCole Hardman. Yes, he could very well be the third target. Hopefully, fingers crossed on that. But we are getting a piece of that offense. And that's just in case, as we continue to see with the NFL, with Travis Etienne, not for long. Injuries happen to everybody in the NFL, and they're unavoidable, unfortunately. And an injury can open up opportunity if you have a piece of that offense. So late round, yes, not prioritizing, not moving him up. If he's there, is he an upside guy? Absolutely. So I have taken him in a couple drafts, but only because of what we have just seen that they actually did use him in 2 wide sets.
Okay. I wasn't going to bring this up, but real quick, Jeff, just because to Sean Reed of The Athletic just tweeted this, and just as we're doing this show live, I just saw this pop up. Derek Carr, Henry Ruggs, Bryan Edwards, and Hunter Renfrow are working separately, going through the routes on air during their first period of team drills today. The reason I saw this and was going to ask you this, Jeff, is because I just did Pat's show, which comes out tomorrow if you're listening on Wednesday. It's going to already be out if you're listening on Thursday. Is he asked me about John Brown. And I said, that's honestly, I think, one of the more disappointing things that people aren't talking about, as I was taking a lot of John Brown late, because it was like, let's remember who John Brown is. Let's know how much the fantasy community loves John Brown. And he came into an opportunity where Ruggs and Edwards both struggled mightily as rookies, and Edwards got hurt. And now all the reports have been, and again, everybody looks great in the preseason, but the reports on Ruggs and Edwards have been glowing for both of them. And if you're hearing also that's those 3 with Hunter Renfrow and no John Brown in sight, and nobody's talking about, like, I cannot find a beat reporter talking about John Brown. Is our hope for John Brown, is John Brown not draftable anymore?
I don't think he's been draftable for weeks. Really, that he'd be competing with Bryan Edwards for that spot, because we know Renfrow is going to be locked in, especially if he is as good against Jalen Ramsey as he said he was. And we knew that Ruggs was going to be locked in as well. So, yeah, I think going back, even flex, I think he was drafted in one of those drafts, and I remember thinking, ooh, I don't know about that, because I had moved him out of that spot in projections, which basically dropped him off the draft board completely. So, yeah, at this point, obviously keep him on your list of players to monitor in case something happens in Vegas. But no, I believe this report 100%. This team wants to stay young at the position. They want to shoot for the upside they have in Edwards and Ruggs, and then obviously Renfro's locked in as the slot.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the last time I had John Brown was like best ball, as you mentioned, best ball, like the guys that were drafting to. And I didn't jump in on that. I'm with you with the dude to be like, oh, this is why you don't draft until the night before the season starts, blah, blah, blah. Well, if you're drafting a month ago, this is also while you're watching yourself get Javonte Williams and Michael Carter back then, like in the 10th round before even getting to the 7th. Right? So you can argue both sides of it. Obviously, you open yourself up to injuries, but you also get amazing values that once everybody learns about. So you could argue both sides of it. I'm with you. It's just everybody's the smartest guy in the room if you're watching with hindsight. That's why it's called hindsight. So Quadre Olison officially, quote unquote, he's the guy behind Mike Davis. I put this question in here, Jeff. The question is just this simple. Do you care?
Not really.
So not really.
Not really. I'm glad though. I mean, so the Javian Hawkins thing was literally people saw a name, and it's a cool name. Like Javian Hawkins, dude, you got a badass name. I love that name. But Javian Hawkins, if we watch the darn player, know the context of the player, he's 5'7", 175 pounds. Like I remember I said, like, when have we ever seen a running back like that have success at the pro level? And somebody, of course, comes back like, Warwick Dunn. And it's like, okay, bro, you're going to like name the one guy from how long ago who at that size profile had success.
Are all your followers just bros? Is that what it is? That's your entire...
No, the Rat Pack is not bros. If they're not in the Rat Pack, then they're a bunch of bros.
They're bros.
They wear like South Carolina hats that say that word I'm not going to say on this broadcast, all right? And they think it's cool.
You got to bring them around. You got to bring them around for their show. They're dude bros because they always say both. They're like, "What's up, dude, bro? What's up, bro? Dude, bro, bro." They got dude, bro. So I'm with you with that. No. I understand the size. So, you know who's not that much bigger than him is, and this is what I said about coming out of college for Javian Hawkins, is like maybe he can be Nyheim Hines or Tariq Cohen at best, and that's
But they were
what it was
both
like.
drafted for a reason.
Right.
You know, Nyheim Hines ran one of the better 40 times at the combine. Tariq Cohen, oh my, go watch some Tariq Cohen college highlights. They didn't call him the human joystick for nothing. They were definitely the exceptions, and he was Hawkins is sort of poor man's version. They called him PlayStation, like he's still got a video game nickname as well.
Yeah.
But he wasn't quite there, and he went undrafted for a reason, and he wasn't a 3-down, like a 350 carry guy like James Robinson at the college level. So we were all kidding ourselves. Olsen, the only thing that I have there is that Mike Davis is so uninspiring as a lead back that maybe there's something. But again, my roster construction, I'm usually not drafting a running back in the late rounds where he's going. So is he draftable? Yes. Am I drafting him? Probably not. And don't really think there's much here.
Yeah, I don't even think there's too much. And I don't think Olsen's that bad. I actually think Olsen could be kind of a more pounder than, you know what, honestly, kind of somewhat like Mike Davis, but not in the passing game. So I think if something were to happen here, if something Mike Davis did go down, I think you could see the Falcons kind of being one of those ones that kicks the tires on, hey, let's go bring back, let's say Freeman gets cut. Let's bring back Freeman again, or let's go find if Adrian Peterson still wants to play football. Like one of those. Like they're going to be that team that just kind of brings the name in and just kind of like has some competition back there, and it's just at that point a complete mess. You brought up James Robinson. I forgot that I covered it yesterday because the news broke live while I was doing the show with Lauren. But I do want to talk to you about it because we've kind of already gone down this road of where we've pretty much mostly agreed on rankings. The big difference at the beginning of the show was the Darrell Henderson one, so I'm curious where we land on this one. I initially off gut was talking to Lauren, and I said, I feel like he's going to be like RB 15, 16 for me because I kind of just went up the names, and I was like, let me think about the names, and then I went through my projections, and that's actually where he checked in. But I will say this, Jeff, and I've said this already, he checks in there. But of all the names he's around in that tier, which is my third tier of running backs, and that includes Mike Davis and Henderson and Kareem Hunt and guys like Miles Sanders and stuff like that. Of all of them, he brings the most fear, and he has the lowest floor because not James Robinson. I don't doubt James Robinson for a second. People know I was one of the highest guys on James Robinson before James Robinson became a thing last year, but mostly because Emory Hunt told me to go watch his film. So kudos to Emory Hunt. He's the real truther behind James Robinson before anybody else. But when I look at Robinson, my fear is Urban Meyer, who sat there and took a running back in the first round, who brought in Carlos Hyde, who has given them series through the preseason so far. And as of today, nothing's been brought in. Nobody's been signed. Trade hasn't happened like we have with Darrell Henderson. But he had 70+% of the workload last year. I checked him in at this, and people asked me, "What? That seems pretty low," but I'm baking in the risk here. I have him for 58%. I have him under 60% because I don't trust Urban Meyer. But that still checks him in as a high-end RB tier for me.
I also think we have to consider how bad the team could potentially be this year.
Right.
That's a huge factor. Not that they weren't bad last year, but a different regime could change things up. Yesterday, I almost jokingly tweeted prediction: Jags sign Javian Hawkins. Javian Hawkins becomes this year's James Robinson. But I knew nobody would get that joke, and they would literally have thought I was serious. And I just didn't want to deal with that. But regardless, I moved him to 16. I'm right with you there. I actually initially had him at 17, but then moved Swift down because I had Swift at 16. But either way, I typically am not drafting a running back in that range. I love James Robinson for what he did last year. He's a fantasy Colt hero at this point from coming out of nowhere and being a top 10 PPR back. But I just don't trust Urban Meyer in general. Anything he says, much less I don't know if I trust him as a coach. We'll see. Probably won't. And then I don't trust the overall state of the team. So again, I said this earlier with Sony Michel, trade happened. Where do I pick him? I got to pick him. Where do I pick? No, deep breath. We don't have to pick him. And same thing with James Robinson. We don't necessarily have to draft James Robinson. Somebody else could take him in that range, and maybe they end up striking gold, but I think chances are they may not, and it may just be a frustrating ride where even if he finishes at that spot, it could be a lot of ups and downs. Etienne is interesting too, by the way, Jake. Etienne in a redraft league, cut him. Etienne in a keeper league, probably cut him because I don't think his value is going to be that much higher next year. It's not like, oh my God, Etienne, first round pick. He's probably going to go in about the same range as you had him this year, and you may have to eat up a bench spot all year for him. I don't like that. In a dynasty league, hold him. Hold! Don't trade him away. Seriously. If somebody wants to trade him away, offer them junk. Yeah, offer him junk. Yeah. Give him a second and a fourth round rookie pick or something like that.
No. You know what? Hey, I'll give you one for my dynasty league. And I wish I was looking down my running back roster and was like, and I'm debating a wide receiver, but I saw somebody else's roster and I was like, you know what? If I was that manager, this is what I would offer. The other manager that I was looking at has Kenyon Drake. I'd say, here's Kenyon Drake for Travis Etienne. And you know what? I see, but that's the thing is you might get people that, because especially if they're a contender. So I'm with you. Go buy him if possible. So you said you don't have to take him. I'm going to go back to last night's the flex draft to give you a point. Is he went in the middle of the third round, 17th running back off the board, which is the spot lower than you, 2 spots lower, or no, 2 spots lower than me. Yeah, 15. So right around where we have him. But as you're saying, to comparatively talk about why you don't need to take him there, because the 3 receivers after him in this round, Jeff, Chris Godwin, Allen Robinson, Amari Cooper. Take the receivers. The next round, Mike Evans, Robert Woods, Deontay Johnson, Tyler Lockett, Cooper Kupp, Adam Thielen. Next round, Julio Jones, T. Higgins, DJ Moore. And if you look at the running backs, as much as we have them there, we have Robinson 15 and 16, but how big is the gap that when you see Jacobs, Dobbins, Henderson in the next round, Mike Davis in the next round, Hunt, Raheem Mostert, Trey Sermon in the round after that with Damian Harris, as I mentioned to you before when we ran through those running backs. Like, is James Robinson III worth paying a 2-round price over Damian Harris? Well, probably not today. Oh, so screw him. But James Robinson 2-round difference over Mostert or Hunt? No, because you should be taking those wide receivers.
Yeah, and people are hating on Mike Evans way too much, and I love it. I will 4th round. But the touchdowns are regret. Okay, the dude every year 1,000 yards. I know people don't like him. I get it, but when we play fantasy football, you got to throw that all out. We're not fans when we play fantasy football. We're trying to win our leagues, And they were on the same page. Once they got on the same page, him and Tom Brady last year, they were off to the races. They're on the same page now. And Chris Godwin's fine too. It's not a knock on Chris Godwin. When I hear sometimes where Evans goes, if he's going as the 15th, 16th, 17th receiver, for me, that is just gravy right there, and I love it.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, ask one question before we get back to our list here. Jenna? Maybe? Question mark? 9?
Samsonite?
Yeah, I know. That was way off. If you want to throw that up, Tino, thoughts on Amari Cooper coming off the foot injury and CD's expected ascension, because I'm asking you this, Jeff, because I got this question in my updated rankings, and I have them almost back-to-back, and the question was like, why is everybody hating on Amari Cooper? And I think it's because of the injury. People are concerned about injury, rightfully so, but if healthy, are they not back-to-back? Do people just want CeeDee Lamb to be this year's Calvin Ridley and just take over as the number 1? And even if that does happen, who cares? They're both wide receiver 1s.
Amari Cooper had 6 straight games where he was a massive bust for fantasy purposes, so everybody got so fed up in 2018 that they benched him, and he proceeded to have one of the best games of his career in the first half in Week 7 on Thursday Night Football when he was on everybody's bench. He is another love to hate. I get it. You love to hate him. Okay, cool. I'll take him at a discount because I want a piece of that offense. They're back-to-back in my rankings. I finally was like, all right, fine, guys. I'll put CD 1 spot ahead of him, but I'm not moving Cooper down dramatically. 13 and 14 for me, really making a statement with my rankings right now that both of them could be RB1s. They're right on that edge, and they're really back-to-back. I think there's a situation, too, by the way, where Cooper leads the team in catches, but Lamb still is just a tick ahead of him in fantasy points because there's a little bit more upside with him, but it's not to say there isn't with Cooper. I just think it's people love to hate Amari Cooper in fantasy football, and that's it. Perception over reality in this case.
Yeah, funny. We're a little bit different, but not much. I have Cooper 12, Godwin 13, Lamb 14. So, boom, right there. And guess what? If you I don't ever want to draft two from the same team, but we just saw last year multiple teams do it as wide receiver ones. Every single year we have at least one, if not two or three teams post two wide receiver ones, usually just about one, but sometimes we get two or three. I mean, you can go back to the days of two Packers consistently, and you never wanted it, but if you were like, oh, I got Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb, well, guess what? That 1 year, you had two top 10. Actually, I think you had two top 6 wide receivers that 1 year. It was so ridiculous, but it can be done. So, right, quick, I don't want to say quick fire, but maybe ish. We don't have to go as long on these guys because these are kind of more late round options that not everybody's necessarily concerned with. But so the question for Houston I have for you, Jeff, is very simple. Is there any value outside of Brandon Cooks for the second wide receiver? And right now, with how things are trending, is it Chris Conley?
There isn't, and maybe
there isn't, so it doesn't matter.
But really, who cares? Charles Robinson had the report that basically with the legal proceedings, Watson would be eligible, very likely to play this year. That doesn't mean he's playing because John McClain has seriously, John McClain, every time he's like, guys, I how many times do I have to say it? He's told me he's not playing for this team. So we can't just simply read a blurb, a news blurb without context and say, oh, wow, now Watson's playing. Okay, now we're all good. I don't know if we can count on that at all. That being said, he may not be suspended until after the legal proceedings, which likely will not happen until 2022. But I still am really basically thinking that Tyrod Taylor is going to be the starter initially. At some point, maybe we see Davis Mills. Neither one of those bodes well for passing. Tyrod Taylor is a fine starting quarterback. He's not a passing quarterback. It's not going to be a high-volume passing game. And then Davis Mills could be an absolute disaster, if he does get under center. So Brandon Cooks, take a discount if it's there. Don't force the issue as a top 35 receiver. But if he's there and 40 receivers are off the board, why not? They don't have a problem with that. Just know that Brandon Cooks could go out there and give you a goose egg and then go for 140 yards and 8 catches and 2 touchdowns next week.
He
could. The ride we get.
But we differ on that one. I have him as a top 25 wide receiver.
Nice.
I keep, yeah, I mean, because this is what I go back to. 140 targets. Worst case scenario, he catches half from miserable quarterback play. 70 receptions is 1,000 yards and multiple 6-7 touchdowns for Brandon Cooks because of Brandon Cooks. So
you don't have to draft him that high.
No, you don't. That was going to be my next point. And this is what I tell people every single year. And part of the reasons I hate overall rankings and I don't do overall rankings for this point is because people get hung up on those way too much in general too and don't look at position value and what's on the board. But just because I have somebody where I have them does not mean you take them. Like you said, you don't have to take the guy if he's there. If you see that I have Brandon Cooks and you see a plus 18 next to his number versus ADP, you can wait at least 2 rounds. Maybe you want to make sure you get him 1 round. But that's the whole point, is you don't have to take him there. So I'm glad you brought that up. That's where I was going with that anyway. All right, so let's go over to Indianapolis. Carson Wentz sounds like he's going to try and play in week 1, maybe week 2 or 3 at the latest, but that's not what we're talking about with this one. Is Carson Wentz's receivers. There's a lot of hope for Paris Campbell as the third wide receiver, working out of the slot, especially that he did his college. I see you shaking your head already. Zach Pascal's playing more than him. Are the hopes dashed? Are we done in hoping that Paris Campbell was going to be a thing?
I'd like to see him stay on the field first before we have any,
He's been healthy and he's not even on the field.
I'm thinking from a dynasty perspective. I want to see him get through a whole darn season though. Not going to throw in the towel there, but that's like deep dynasty. Of course, we aren't going to throw towels in on younger players, but he's not draftable for me as a late round guy. Really, there's only one draftable guy out of those wide receivers for me, and he's going too early. I don't know, legit. I think I made this joke a couple weeks ago, but why Michael Pittman keeper over a lot of guys? Why is that a thing this year? I'm not quite getting it. Wide receiver 4, sure. Wide receiver 4 with upside, gotcha. Wide receiver 2.
He went wide receiver 62 in the draft last night.
Okay, yeah, and maybe that's good value. I think in the 50s is fine.
Well, he's going around in that draft. He went around Marquise Brown, Ruggs, Marshall, Aguilar, and Rager. That's who he went around.
Which that's a good grouping for him. The other players I had mentioned, I'm not drafting Paris Campbell. I took him off of my draft board, and I'll let somebody else draft T.Y. Hilton. Cool. He's a name you know. He's comfortable. He's like that old pair of jeans, but that old pair of jeans is out of style, and you look corny wearing them right now. So we don't want him on our roster.
Yeah, but you got to wear him to like an old style party at the end of last year, Jeff. Like it was a throwback party for the last couple weeks.
Are people doing like early 2010s parties now? Is that like the 80s party that people used to do? Is that how old we've gotten?
Are we going to make us that old? No. So let's just move on to the last topic then. Screw that. Forget that. The Panthers. We've danced around the Panthers a couple times today. But one of the things with the Panthers last year is all three of the receivers were top 30. The difference is no Christian McCaffrey. However, I don't know where you stand on Marshall as a player, but we agree on a lot of things. So I have a feeling you're going to agree on Terrace Marshall. But I said he was one of the most inherently gifted wide receivers coming out of college. But the biggest problem was that similar to Marquise Lee, and not stylistically, mentally, because they're lazy, because they were so dominant in college that they ran lazy routes. And if you watch Terrace Marshall from last year, you see defenders on him a lot. You see defenders on his back a lot. But he was Terrace Marshall, and he's so damn good, it didn't matter. So if he cleans that up, and it looks like he's already learned, like it took Marquise Lee, 3 years to learn that and finally turn into something, and then he got hurt, unfortunately, just as he was coming around. But with Marshall looking as good as he does already, Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore in the fold, Christian McCaffrey is back. Is there anything here from Marshall, or this is the term some people are starting to throw out this year, Jeff, is he maybe a handcuff wide receiver?
So was it Doug Marrone who called Marquise Lee the albino tiger because he was so rare you almost never saw him? I think that was the nickname for
I remember
him.
the nickname. I think that might be right. Who said it though?
I don't know. I forget which coach it was, but either way, that's pretty funny right there. Yeah, he made some crazy contested catches last year. And I had said he has the skill set of Justin Jefferson in a lot of ways because he played that role in that offense for LSU. But he also had that Kenny Golladay ability to play above the rim. Add those two together, and that's pretty darn good. So, yes, cleaning things up is important. He's already flashed here. They got him at a great value because of medical concerns that were raised during the pre-draft process. Should have been a first-rounder, wasn't. So anything in day two like that, if it pans out, it's going to be great. Now, I think long-term, I had said Robbie Anderson, that could be the long-term replacement. Well, I don't know. Contract situations have changed since then. So
right.
Maybe they're just going to roll with three wideouts going forward. I do not believe in a handcuff wide receiver, and I will tell you flat out why. It's similar to that very basic level thought of when people look at a depth chart and they say Tariq Cohen's second on the depth chart. Not that he is right now, but like before, okay, so he's the handcuff to David Montgomery. And it was like, no, he wasn't. Last year they didn't freaking have one. And now they actually do. It's probably Damian Williams. But regardless, just because they're second on the depth chart doesn't mean they're a handcuff. Well, just because they're a wide receiver who we call a wide receiver 3 doesn't mean that an NFL team is calling them a wide receiver 3. They have designated positions in their offense. And so if Robbie went down, is it Terrace Marshall that moves to that spot, or is another receiver come up into that spot? Does the target pecking order change? These are questions I can't necessarily answer without being in the building, but it does make me reluctant to use that term. If you're drafting Anderson, you're drafting him as the number 3 receiver on that team in terms of targets, which means he's the number 4 target on that team, as you mentioned, Christian McCaffrey. So you're going to have to make sure your expectations are tempered. There's going to be a week or two where he goes off, but there's going to be also plenty of weeks where he does not. And if he's in your starting lineup, that's not going to be fun.
You don't even realize, but you set up a perfect segue to get out of here, Jeff, because it sounds like DFS. And if you're playing DFS, and if you're looking for these opportunities, code ALLIN, ALLIN, 20% off at FTN. Tons of work for Jeff over there as well, if you want to check all that out. Also, reminder again, theathletic.com/BetsTV, all caps. Get you a first free month so you can go check out the rankings and projections, and make sure you're checking out Jeff and following Jeff at Jeff Ratcliffe and listening to him on SiriusXM. And last request, please, again, more free shows for you guys. We can do it with more thumbs up, subscribe, 5 stars, rate, review, all the good stuff on whatever you're watching or listening on. We love you. We will see you on Monday with Meanie, back Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, every single week, all in football on BetsTV. Thank you, guys.